Welcome again. I think it's been a marvelous day. We've had some really great science today, some great presentations. I really like it when the meeting starts off on such a high note.
Let's keep it that way.
It's going to be up to you. Okay, I do have one thing that I do have to touch on though, and that is something that's we've been hearing about in all the meetings and everything like that, and that of course is harassment at meetings. And so I just wanted to remind people that that the LPSC is a zero tolerance for harassment, obviously, and that if anybody at all ever feels concerned or has issues, they should find me, find any of my staff, and they will point you in the right direction, and we will look after things from there. So we really want this meeting to be as healthy and as enjoyable for everybody. So on that note, welcome to NASA Night. We've got Jim and Jonathan and Kristen here to talk to us this evening about the state of things within NASA Planetary Sciences and within the education, SMD education. I do have just two quick announcements. One is that we're going to hear tonight from Jim in particular about the budget and things like that, and a lot of different aspects of the Planetary Science program going forward. The Planetary Society is going to hold a town hall tomorrow at lunchtime in, I forget which room, one of these rooms, one of the bigger rooms, I think. And it will be an opportunity for people in the community to continue to air their thoughts and about the various things, the direction that planetary sciences is going in and the like. And the whole idea is that Jim gets to present and then we get to pick it apart. So. Please, it'll be, I think, it'll be lunchtime tomorrow in one of the bigger rooms. So please attend and participate in the future of your community. The other thing that we've got on is we do in one of the smaller rooms. I didn't even write down which room it is. Tomorrow, also at lunchtime, there's going to be a presentation on the NASA postdoc program. And quite a number of people are aware that the NASA postdoc program transitioned from being run by ORAL to being run by USRA relatively recently. It has not been a totally seamless transition. However, there'll be an opportunity for people to come along and people who are interested in the postdoc program can come along and hear a little bit about the program, ask questions and so on. So you're very welcome to join the group in there. With no further ado, I would welcome my colleagues here, and I believe we're going to hear first from Jonathan Rall about RNA again.
Again.
Okay.
Ad nauseum.
You guys can introduce yourselves, right?
Sure. I'm Jonathan Rall. I'm the Planetary Research Director in the Planetary Science Division at NASA headquarters. I'll be giving the RNA update today. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because we got a lot of content, but we're going to post these things for you guys to download. So I'm going to show at the end a keyword analysis of all of the activities we've funded over the last 5 years. And it's too dense to talk about here, but you can take a look at it, and if you have questions, I expect to hear more later. Okay, so ROSE's 2016 deadlines are out. ROSE's has been released. Here they are. Take a picture of it quickly if you're really interested, but let's just say that the deadlines start in late May and continue throughout the year. One thing to note is solar system workings. As you all know, we had two deadlines this past year. We had two step 2 deadlines. We're going to consolidate the two step 2 deadlines to a single step 2 in February. Oops, excuse me. That's not the laser. There's the step 1 in November, and the single step 2 will be in February 23rd of 2017, 11 months from now. Okay. The reason why we did this is obvious. we had basically a mashup of deadlines in Rose's 2014 and Rose's 2015 that led to very, very dense review panel scheduling in the fall. So what we've done is by moving the second step 2 deadline to February, we've deconflicted the schedule. So this is going to help us even it out to a steady state. Okay, these are the changes in the step 2 proposals from Rose's 2014 to Rose's 2015. Overall, we've seen an attrition or basically an attrition rate of 15%. 2 notable increases, ExoBio and DDAP, and I believe the DDAP increase of 40 plus 44 was due to Dawn at Ceres. Is that correct? Vesta, Dawn at Messenger. Oh, okay, Messenger. Thank you. Program officers in the front row, besides being human meat shields for me, could you please step in and tell me if I've gone off the rails? Okay, as you can see, Matisse was not selected in Rose's 2015, but it is called for Rose's 2016. All right, this is the Maxogram, we call it, in honor of Max Bernstein. This is Rose's 2014. I showed this at DPS last fall. Nothing has changed. We have not incorporated the results from Rose's 2015, but once we're done with awards, we will do that. But that shows we've selected just over 20% of proposals for awards. This is the Where's My Money chart. We actually, just this last month, I'm not going to go through this because it's so dense, but just this last month, we've got our full year appropriation, and we expect, I've signed a bunch of selection documents, expect awards to be going out very rapidly. And speaking of which, this is the speed of money chart that I showed at DPS last year, and this shows basically that within 60 days, from the last button push of a program officer, within 60 days, 50% of awards have been made and the money's received. And then by 90 days, basically the 1 over E squared point, about 85, 86% of the awards have been completed. Again, that's 2014 data. We'll update it when we get 2015. I don't expect the shape of this S-curve to change dramatically. Okay, so let's talk about facilities. We recognize that we've had these long-term NASA-funded facilities. We decided we're going to do a review of them so that we can establish whether they're actually supporting the needs of the planetary community. We're going to summarize lessons learned from a PSD facilities review that we've initiated. We have an RFI on the street. I'll show you in a second where it is. It's still open, so if you have any information or any ideas you want to convey to us, please go to that site. We have a facilities session on Thursday I'll talk about in a minute. And then we're planning on releasing a cooperative agreement notice sometime later this year for all facilities. Okay, the facilities we receive progress reports from are the 4 you see up at top there: Planetary Aeolian Lab, Reflectance Lab or RELAB, the GEAR, Glen Extreme Environment Rig, and the Ames Vertical Gun. Each facility had an hour to present and then an hour for Q&A. Basically, a laundry list of things we wanted them to address. The review panels were composed of users and community members. And basically, we've received reports from them. The final report will be going out very shortly. We'll post it at the LPI website for everyone to see. Uh-oh. Could you advance the next slide, please? I seem to have broken the remote. Okay, so the RFI was released back in January. It goes through April 30th. PDF file format, attach it to an email, send it to Doris Dow, and use the email subject line of Rose's response to facilities RFI. We want to basically answer the 3 questions, give us feedback for our future CAN. Okay, next slide, please. All right. As I said, there's an LPSC session, special session on facilities. It'll be Thursday afternoon, March 24th, as you can see, in the Waterways Ballroom. We put together a Wordle for it. These are basically all of the, what is it, Jared? Abstracts. It was, we created the Wordle from the abstracts. All right, next slide, please. Okay, there's a website. We've put up a website at the LPI server for facilities. Next slide, please. All right. One thing the PSS was very interested in was having a survey of all laboratory scientists. Is your laboratory adequately supported? The Planetary Science Subcommittee perceives that the PI-led laboratories are not well supported. They're underfunded. So they're conducting the survey. So please, I really it would help us if you guys would, especially the lab scientists, to respond to this survey. Next slide, please. Okay, so the budget for FY16 as is posted, the Planetary RNA, we have 154 million. That is the competed portion of the appropriated money. We have a separate Mars data analysis program line of 9.4 million. Outer Planets has a Cassini data analysis program in PSP of 8.4 million. Discovery Research is at 11.4. The JERPA, the Joint Robotics Program for Exploration, which funds our Survey Institute, is at 10 million. And then the competed portion of the NEO program is about $21 million. We're expecting $25 million of Europa technology. It remains to be seen how much of that is competed, but that also, that will be used for some instrument technology as well as some infrastructure technology, entry, descent, landing, things of that nature. So all rolled up about $214 million of competed research. Jim. Okay, we've charged the Space Studies Board to do an RNA study. This is to look at the reorganization of the RNA program in Planetary. Excuse me. Are the RNA program elements appropriately linked to, and do they encompass the scope of activities to support the NASA strategic objectives for the Planetary Science Division? And are the program elements adequately structured to develop the broad base of knowledge and broad range of activities needed to enable new spaceflight missions and to interpret and maximize the scientific return? So the ad hoc committee, I understand, has been formed or is very close to being completed, and we expect a draft report by December. Next slide, thank you. Okay, OSTP issued a memo back in February of 2013, basically stating that if you have $100 million of funded, competed research, you have to make the results of this federally funded research publicly available. This was Policy Directive 2230. That was NASA's response to this. There's a website, and there'll be a repository for all of this data. Next slide. Well, actually, go back a second. At the bottom, it's very important to read that. Effective data management has the potential to increase the pace of scientific discovery and promote more efficient and effective use of government funding and resources. We take that very seriously. So, next slide, please. So, all solicitations will have a data management plan. Those of you who went to the town hall today saw that we were taking this very seriously. The data management plan will not be counted in the page count. We'll give you 2 extra pages to cover this, to cover the data management plan. But it must be included in all proposals where data will be generated. There's a slight bifurcation here for extramural, external PIs or proposals. The grantees and contractors submit accepted peer-reviewed manuscripts to PubSpace. But for the internal civil servant scientists, they'll go through the NASA Science and Technology Information Program, STI program. And then STI will upload those into PubSpace. Next slide, please. Okay, Office of Chief Scientist. Is Ellen here by any chance? Did she make it yet? Okay, she's not here yet. So We have never collected demographic data in our proposals, and we now are allowed to collect demographic data. So we're going to do that. So NASA Form 1839. I just have to smile because NASA, the certain form numbers stick to your mind after a while. 20-4 shipping document, an SF-52 notification of personnel action. 1839, where'd they come up with that? Well, it just so happens that Louis Jacques Daguerre took the first picture of the moon in 1839. Not that it has anything to do with demographic data, but that's pretty phenomenal.
That's how you're going to remember it.
So now you're all going to remember that. Okay, so we're going to collect the data. The form is now included in all solicitations. Panel reviewers will not see it. It's totally anonymous. And optional. So I encourage you to fill it out as long as you're comfortable with it. It will not be included in the proposal review package, so no one else is going to see this. It will not be used in any way to determine grant awards, but please fill out. We would love to be able to say succinctly, clearly, definitively, there is no unconscientious bias, there is no implicit bias. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm gonna go quickly through a keyword analysis. Okay, so we've been collecting keywords for our awards for many years, and they've not all been complete, they've not all been done right. We've had to cleanse and scrub the data and correct it. But this covers Rose's 2011, actually no, it's FY11 through FY15, which is Rose's 2010 through Rose's 2014. It competed Rose's programs, including DAPS and participating scientists, so all the core programs plus DAPS and PSPs, but it excludes things like the institutes. There's a caveat here, keywords were not submitted for all tasks. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but this is the trend. Now, what I want to point your eyes to is the red line between 2014 and 2015. That is the delineation between the old legacy structure and the restructuring. Now, don't jump to any conclusions because 2/3 of the 2015 stacked bar chart is the old legacy structure. That's roughly approximately 2/3. 1/3 of it is the new structure. So this is keyword number 2. This is the object of study, and as you can see that it waxes and wanes depending on what target is hot that year. Next slide. Okay, this is a breakdown of the small bodies. So just oscillate a little. Go back to the previous chart, Jim. Okay, the small bodies is the green color at the second to the top, the pentultimate. All right, so it's about $16, $17, $18 million. Next slide, please. And this is a breakout of it by sub-target, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, this is the outer planets breakdown. Likewise, this is how we broke down the outer planets. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is a breakdown of the other targets. So there was a small section of other targets. Now, the one caveat I want to put in here, and we've got to fix, is from 2014 to 2015 is a doubling of the non-specific planets. And I think what happened there is we coded in exoplanets into that. So we'll stay tuned. Don't take that don't take that as biblical. That's not right. We're going to fix that. But in general, this is the kind of analysis we're going to be doing going forward. It's been a long time coming, and it's something that we really, really need to have. And this is going to help us with our SSB study. We expect the ad hoc committee to come back to us, ask us lots of questions, demand data like this, and now we're in the position to give it to them. So, all right, next slide, please, Jim. All right, questions? And Steve, do we want to wait till? Okay, that's just a generic. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Kristen Erickson, and I will pull up the first chart, please. I'm the current Director of Science Engagement and Partnerships at NASA headquarters. And a couple of years ago, I was asked to lead the restructuring activity within all of NASA SMD for science education. But before I begin, let me see a show of hands. How many in the room have kids? How many have grandkids? How many were ever a kid? Okay, the rest of you can go back to checking your emails. If there's one takeaway from this presentation, it is to please, 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 anything that we've done over the last 2 years in science restructuring, education restructuring, does not impede your efforts to go into your children's classroom, to go to your grandkids' camp, summer camp, to do your volunteer work. In fact, what we've tried to do is to enable that further. You still have access to over 2,000 products and services that are free and downloadable through the NASA Wavelength Catalog. You still have access to the wonderful visualizations that Goddard SBS Group does. That's all free and downloadable. Or the Eyes on Solar System products, which includes Eyes on Earth, Eyes on Exoplanets, and the recent launch vehicles visualizations. All of those are still accessible to you, and that's indeed all been curated. You also may not be aware of the beautiful Survey JPL products like Mars Trek, Moon Tours, Vesta Trek. This allows you to play on the surface of these beautiful planetary objects, and then with a click to go and 3D print so that you can have a crater from Vesta on your desktop, on your literal desktop. So those are things that are still all available, all vibrant, all funded. In addition, I know I went through that very fast, but the people that can assist you around the country are also still funded. Folks like Alice Wesson and Michelle Viotti at JPL, or Laura Bleacher at Goddard, our own Brian Day here from Survey. All of them are available to assist you in these services. So what have we done with SMD's SE, as we say, Science Education Restructuring? First chart. So as background, this year's appropriation, FY16, has devoted $37 million to science education within SMD. We are the only mission directorate that receives science education funding, or education funding. The only other group that did was the Office of Education, that runs the products, the strategy, the framework, the implementation processes, if you will, for the agency. But what we do is we have the people and the content and the authentic experiences that brings into that learning environment. And so several years ago, 2 years ago, after the debacle in 2013, when all of our funding was removed, the leaders in NASA science, such as Jim Green and our other division directors, were asked by Dr. John Grunsfeld to say, you know, how are we going to maintain leadership for the country? This is such an important effort. We all have seen it firsthand. What are we going to do to maintain that leadership in light of this budget going away? And so we basically formed a small working group, and from that we issued a competitive solicitation, as many of you may know, in February of last year. And from that competitive solicitation, we had a peer review process, just like we do in science. And from that, we had 27 selections. And this was 27 selections out of 73 compliant proposals. So that's a rate of about 37%. It's higher than some of you may have seen in some of our other science solicitations. But we were pretty pleased that so many wanted to participate with us in this restructured effort, because we took a different approach. It wasn't mission-based like had been since really 1993 and beyond. It was more of, let's first ask what's happening in the learning environment. Let's see what's going on. We aren't in control of that learning environment, wherever it may be across the country. There's so many things that are out of our control. And again, what we do is we want to bring our content and our knowledge experts into that equation more effectively and efficiently. And so what we were able to do is to select the 27. The selectees are posted at the web link, but just to provide a couple of more demographic information, we had 15 out of the 27 from legacy institutions. These are folks that had been with SMD science education for the past 20+ years. And that makes sense because it's not like we were starting from scratch. The reason why we were able to continue to get funded was because of those legacy folks. And so that was about a 56% rate of selections. Of the 27, 17 of the selections included planetary science content. Next chart. So geographically, here's a map of the distribution of the PIs and the COIs. And you can see that, gratefully, we were pretty dispersed across the country. And this is, again, because we're taxpayer funded. We do have, however, some underserved areas, both regionally, geographically, demographically, that we have identified, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But across the 27, we have new partners that we didn't have before, like WGBH. These are the folks up in Boston that run PBS Learning Media. We have the American Museum of Natural History. This is the group from the Rose Planetarium up in New York City. We also have some folks that are cover the breadth of NASA science, like our friend Doug Duncan from the Fisk Planetarium, or the CosmoQuest citizen science folks. That's to name a few of those that are cross-cutting NASA science, not just planetary, but specific to planetary. I wanted to focus on 4. Next chart. So one of the very exciting proposals was from Lindy Elkins-Tanton from Arizona State University. She had quite a year last year, to say the least. Not only was the winner of a discovery, but also she won one of the big science education awards. But what her team is doing at Arizona State is going to, what we hope, be on the forefront of education technology. And so what she's doing is she's leading a group that is taking the previous funding from a Gates Foundation grant with Smart Sparrow, taking the leadership from Michael Crow, the president of ASU, bringing her team together, as well as the SMEs led by Phil Christensen and others, and creating what will be a collaborative space for the scientists, the educators, to all work real time when those science discoveries are taking place. And so this will really be at the forefront from an education technology standpoint. So what her team is doing is truly cutting edge, and we're so excited that she can help us really be in the learning environment more effectively and efficiently. We also have a grant with the 44 Challenger Centers. They want to focus on Mars content first, and so that's very exciting. Of course, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, long-standing stalwarts and experts in the Mars education arena. We also have a new player, Northern Arizona University, and they're putting together curriculum in the informal education setting. This would be for those out-of-school learning environments. And so I just wanted to highlight 4 of the awardees. Next chart. So even though we tried to be all-encompassing in our competitive solicitation, we did have gaps. And one of those major gaps, as I mentioned before, was in the underserved area. Now, one of the things that we're going to be doing is working hard to get additional expertise on how we can do a better job, but I wanted to raise your awareness of this opportunity that just came up over at our sister agency, the National Science Foundation. So Franz Cordova, who used to be the chief scientist of NASA, put out a Dear Colleague letter, and it was really to let people know of this opportunity called NSF Includes. Notice the acronym is quite convoluted, so they do acronyms like we do sometimes, but what it is that it'll be a series of 5-year grants at $30K each. And why I also want to raise your attention to this is that if you don't put in your pre-proposal request, which is due April 15th, then you can't play in the rest of the process. So that's kind of a unique thing to NSF. So please, hopefully if this fits within your institutional strategies, please look at that and propose accordingly. So with that, I am officially Jim Green's warm-up act, and I will turn it over to him, but not before I wanted to thank him personally for his leadership in science education. One of the things that all the division directors did was to commit to having some seed funding within their divisions for scientists that want to, as we say, would be the push to the science education awardees pull. And so this would be a way of funding SMEs that would like to work with the new awardees. And Jim was really the first to put his money where his mouth was, in that the, some of you know, the extended mission language has in there funding, directed funding for science education. So I want to personally thank you for your leadership throughout this whole process and your continued passion for what we're doing in science education. And with that, here's Jim Green.
Okay, next slide, please. One of the things I typically do as we start an overview of the Planetary Science Division is to show our mission event chart and really thank everyone in the community for making these exciting things happen. You know, Planetary Science has a lot of opportunities for education and outreach during events, you know, like the landing of Curiosity, like the Pluto flyby. And, you know, these events really allow us to marshal resources and engage the public and use that as an opportunity to talk about science, talk about the engineering and what it takes to do these things with mathematics. And of course, there's the arts that are involved in this also. Upcoming in 2016, I want to congratulate ESA for a fabulous launch of the Trace Gas Orbiter. It's well on its way to Mars now. It's working great from all reports I've heard. The next set of activities that are on my list to really look at and promote. July 4th is Juno's insertion in orbit at Jupiter. It's taken quite a while to get there after a couple flybys and gravity assists. But it soon will be in orbit, and it also is working quite well. I want to point out, here's an opportunity, July 20th, to look back at what we have done with the Vikings. You know, the orbiters and the 2 landers made a fabulous set of initial observations at Mars, and actually was the bulk of Mars research for quite a while until we got back on track in the 90s with additional missions to Mars. And the 40th anniversary, rather, is coming up July 20th. Many events are occurring around that. Also, OSIRIS-REx, their window opens September 8th. We're launching out of Kennedy. OSIRIS-REx is doing absolutely spectacular. It's on time and doing well budgetarily. So I'm really quite delighted with the progress, and everything else seems to be working quite well. So we hope for their completion of the of ATLO and getting on the pad and getting on its way to Bennu, carbonaceous chondrite. Cassini is now going to be starting its multiple swing-bys of Titan, change its plane, and eventually in the April timeframe start orbiting between the first ring and the cloud tops. You know, spectacular views things that we haven't seen before, allowing all kinds of different science, from understanding then what the mass of the rings are, to understanding a little bit more about perhaps the origin of the magnetic field, which has been quite important in our planetary magnetospheres and perhaps how they protect these planets from long-term climate effects. And then, of course, late this year, we're on track for making announcements of the down select and discovery, moving then from phase A to phase B, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do is talk about the budget that we received in FY16. Once again, I want to thank the community. I want you to notice that at $1.63 billion, this is the highest budget planetary science has ever been. Success breeds success. We've had over the last several years some budgetary problems. We've gone through some austere times, and I believe we're starting to come out of that. Now that means we need to all get ready. We all need to get behind our programs and begin to continue on with sharing the excitement, bringing the public along, in addition to doing the fabulous science that comes out in a natural way. Congress was really generous to us this year, gave us $270 million above the president's budget. Now, I've been at headquarters for 10 years, and I've not seen that done before in any part of NASA. It's all due to you. So thank you. Well, the budget breaks down this year, $277 million for planetary science research, and as John said, $214 million or so is directly competed in the RNA program. Other aspects of that are our curation at JSC, our planetary data system, which on occasion we do, of course, recompete, and a number of other things. Oh, and also our near-Earth object activity, which is running at about $50 million. $189 million for discovery. This allowed us to fund LRO this fiscal year. Absolutely. The $259 million in New Frontiers keeps us on track for an upcoming AO and keeps the funding going to support New Horizons for this full year. It's last year before their extended mission proposal will be judged and announced how they do. And getting Juno in orbit, and of course OSIRIS-REx to the launch pad. So those are all great aspects of that budget. $448 million for Mars, which includes $36 additional million and supports the continuation of Opportunity as an extended mission. $197 million for technology, which includes an upper of $55 million. And note, some of that is actually in the icy satellite surface technology. We're about ready to announce and unveil how we'll get this out in terms of our competitive opportunities. I had hoped we'd have it a little further along that I could announce, but not quite yet. We've got a couple more things to do, but look for that coming out as a major opportunity for us to be able to continue to develop tools and techniques and capability that allows us to get down to icy surfaces and interrogate them. And that means any icy world. $261 million in the outer planets area, which included $145 million with direction from Congress. Now, Congress does, on occasion, give us direction. Sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be bad. But indeed, Congress has been so tremendously supportive. This is really wonderful news. You know, for many years, we've talked about how the outer planets might go dark. Okay, that's been quite noticed within the community, and of course, as we've talked about it, and as things have been written about it, and as people have visited their congressional representatives, they remind them, well, gee, after Cassini and Juno, which Juno actually has a pretty short life, about a year. It's not going to be lasting 10 or more years like Cassini does. Then what's next? And of course, one of the top things in the planetary decadal last decade and this decade, of course, is going to Europa. And we've worked very hard to be able to obtain the funding, which Congress has given us, to be able to move forward with Phase A on Europa. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's also an interest to start looking at what a lander could do. You know, in planetary science, we do it very methodically, fly-by orbit, land, rove, and return samples. And that's done that way so that as we fly by and say, hey, that's an important object, we need to go back. And maybe that means a mission to Pluto is in our future, who knows? But then we want to be able to get detailed orbiting information so that we then can actually get down to the surface on those particular bodies that are important. We've done that whole range of things for the moon. We're in the process of doing that for Mars. All right? And now for Europa, Congress has provided us additional money that we can study and use in the opportunities moving towards a potential lander for Europa. But of course, we absolutely have to have high-resolution imaging to be able to put it down safely. And that, of course, is the Europa multiple flyby mission that I'll talk also a little bit about. We also received additional direction. This is in the area of planetary defense. This is indeed in cooperation with the European Space Agency. So we're doing mission study across the Atlantic on a mission called IATA-DART. IATA is an asteroid impact and deflection assessment mission. It contains 2 spacecraft that will go to a binary asteroid, one that will survey while another one, DART, will hammer the secondary, which is about the size of Itokawa, 150 or so meters in size. And then from watching the orbital dynamics change, understand how the impactors will work on those type of missions. This is a great little study. Congress has recognized the importance of planetary defense, and we're moving forward with that. We put this mission on the NASA side in Phase A. Now that is really important to understand because we don't have a full mission profile for it, but now we've formalized it and we're working hard to really understand how these techniques might be used in the future if a deflection is necessary for an incoming target. We also received additional direction, and this is quite critical, to establish a new Ocean Worlds program with a primary goal to discover extant life on another world using a mix of discovery, new frontiers, and flagship class missions. Now that's a quote, a lifted quote out of the language that we received in the House appended part of the bill. And what we've done in this direction is a couple things. One, we've been given the approval by the administration to change our budgetary line that we call Outer Planets, which currently contains Cassini, into Outer Planets and Ocean Worlds, and now it contains Europa and potential follow-on missions such as the Europa lander. In addition to that, as many know, we've added 2 Ocean Worlds to the New Frontiers call, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. Now, the President has delivered his budget to Congress. He did so in February, and there are a number of really important things about this budget. And I won't dwell on this because, as a year where there's an election that goes on, there may be a variety of congressional actions that would give us just a continuing resolution rather than a passed budget. This is called the lame duck year, and you just don't know what's going to happen politically. But this budget contains a number of really exciting things, such as continuing to develop and complete the Mars 2020 mission, also continue to do the formulation on Europa, also work with ESA on the JUICE mission, which is going to Ganymede, and then funds our 13 planetary missions, and also increases the RNA program. So once again, has a number of important features about it. But we'll see what happens budgetarily as this works its way through Congress and whether we'll obtain an actual passed budget this year or a continuing resolution. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the Discovery Program. Next slide. So here's our overview we've shown many times. What's in red at the bottom is our working missions. Dawn, of course, it's Ceres, fabulous session today. LRO, also a wonderful lunar session. Now in Discovery Program. This used to be in a program called Lunar Quest, but that was eliminated, and we were able to move LRO into the Discovery Program, and with the additional funding, we then were able to fund it in its extended mission this year. We've delivered to ESA the Strophio instrument, this part of Bepi Colombo, which will be launched next year. And then there's InSight. InSight is a discovery selection from the last call. As many of you know, perhaps everyone knows, we missed our launch window. Our launch window is this month of March, and due to a late delivery on an instrument, we're just not going to pull it off. But everything else was ready. So we have made the decision to be able to delay this, put it in storage, delay it until 2018. Next slide, please. So how does that affect our discovery selections? It affects it, I'm sure, but the bottom line for everyone to remember is out of this list, which is our 5 Phase A discovery missions that we're currently working on, we will select at least one, all right? And depending on how things go, many of you perhaps know, I always like to push the envelope, and we'll see how far I can push it. These 5 missions are fabulous. We have Psyche to a metal asteroid out in the asteroid belt, 2 Venus missions, Veritas and Da Vinci, a NEO camera, a survey, but also looking at characteristics and how the population and families can be put together, and Lucy, which is a survey of a number of Trojans. All really spectacular missions. Wish we could select them all. But as I mentioned, when the proposals come in, they'll be evaluated in the December timeframe. We will be picking at least one. So the delay in InSight hasn't affected that selection. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the New Frontiers program. Next slide, please. So as you all know, our New Frontiers program has 3 major missions in it. New Horizons now, their data is starting to come into PDS in the next several weeks. We're anticipating to create a New Frontiers data analysis program, which will allow people to propose and use that funding to analyze Pluto data. But then, of course, this year we'll start with Juno, getting in orbit at Jupiter. And then as that data becomes public, that will also be called out in the New Frontiers data analysis program. And then, of course, is the launch of OSIRIS-REx, which gets to Bennu in 2018. Stays there for quite a while, about a year or so, selects a sample, and then does a fabulous sample return. So tremendously exciting missions. Next slide, please. What we did in January, after the congressional budget was passed, that includes the congressional direction I talked about, is we issued a community announcement for the New Frontiers program. And in that announcement, we delineated 7 missions that could be proposed. Comet surface sample return, lunar South Pole Aitken Basin sample return, 2 ocean worlds, Titan and Enceladus, that were called out in the legislation, Saturn probes, Trojan Tour and Rendezvous, and Venus in situ Explorer. So Congress has given us the opportunity to leverage our existing program, recognizing the exciting things that have been discovered about Titan and Enceladus since the decadal. And so how can we justify doing that? Well, this really is right now up to the community to provide us input and thoughts. Next slide, please. What several ags have done have indeed considered whether that is the right thing to do, whether it is important to add new and exciting discoveries into a strategic/PI program such as New Frontiers. Many of these committees have had to consider past NRC reports that have come out. Many of these committees are looking also at details in the Planetary Decadal, and then providing findings into the Planetary Science Subcommittee. Now, the Planetary Science Subcommittee just met earlier this month. Here's an excerpt from one of their findings, and I'll take the time to read it. We applaud the public and legislative interest in ocean worlds spurred by recent discoveries related to the possibility of extant life in the oceans of Europa, Enceladus, and Titan. The increased resources made available to the Planetary Science Division significantly enhanced future efforts to explore these intriguing environments. PSS encourages the Planetary Science Division to put in place as soon as possible a process to integrate the community input on science objectives and obtain subsequent confirmation that implementation concepts exist that can achieve those objectives within the New Frontiers cost cap. The Planetary Science Subcommittee encourages the Planetary Science Division to ask CAPS, which is the Committee on Astrobiology and Planetary Science. It is the decadal committee, the keeper of the decadal from the National Academy, to consider whether inclusion of ocean worlds in New Frontiers 4 can be done via the process and practices available, and to identify a path for taking advantage of similar exciting opportunities of this nature going forward. The next CAPS meeting is at the end of the month. So that will be a crucial time for all those that are really quite interested in how this turns out to be able to tune in and listen to the discussion and the back and forth that will go on in that open meeting, and that will also be webcast. Next slide, please. Let's talk quickly about the Mars program. Next slide. What's happening in the Mars program is things are going quite well. Maven's doing super. So is Odyssey and MRO. Opportunity continues on. It's actually wintering over a little bit, but it's got such a great sun angle. It's continuing to do some great science. Curiosity at Gale, of course, and Mars Express, which is an ESA mission that we're part of, is doing well. Mars 2020, that next mission that we're developing in this program, is on track and proceeding well. We had a preliminary design review, which we completed in February of this year, and the sampling system development labs are up and running. And we had a major meeting yesterday, nearly all day long, talking about the sample system and the curation activities that are going to result on that. Foreign commitments are on track, and InSight, as I mentioned, is going to be delayed to 2018. Next slide, please. So this is now our new map, our overview. So we've got, indeed, a couple great things to look forward to in 2018, not only InSight, but ExoMars. If ESA keeps that on track, that rover will be launched also in the 2018 opportunity, and then Mars 2020 in 2020. Next slide, please. Let me talk briefly about the Europa mission. Next slide, please. So indeed, we have selected instruments. We invested initially with funding that we were able to put together through the Homesteader call, RNA call, to help develop further potential instruments for Europa, followed by a call for instruments for Europa, for which we were thinking of maybe a two-step selection. These instruments now were mature enough that we actually can make a straight selection. And so there's a wonderful set of instruments that were selected. Of course, the Europa multiple flyby mission is really all about looking at the ice shell in the ocean, its thickness, its composition, what the geological processes are that's going on, how does the ocean communicate to the surface, but also providing high-resolution, detailed imagery, hopefully at the right places necessary for us to make decisions on potentially a lander going to Europa. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the lander studies are continuing. Next slide, please. I want to mention very briefly that we've also selected 2 CubeSats. Now, CubeSats indeed are very important, particularly here in other fields that can leverage infrastructure here at Earth, launching them in Earth orbit. We've done that many years ago. We had an astrobiology payload that is still orbiting the Earth. And so CubeSats are going to be in our future. CubeSats are going to be important. But we're going to have to go in a way that we identify some technologies that we're going to need, but also look at how instruments are being matured by some of the other disciplines that we can use and leverage. We've selected 2 CubeSats in the Simplex call this last year, and we now are working on another call It'll go in as an amendment to ROSE's. It's not completed yet. We've just started the concept development and how we're going to put it out. So please be on the lookout for that. And when we do these announcements, of course, not only will we put them in our newsletters that go out to everybody in the community that have signed up for them, but also through the NSPIRE's email system. Next slide, please. So the two that we've selected is a lunar polar hydrogen mapper, Craig Hargrove. This particular CubeSat will go with EM1 when it's launched in 2018. And then an Earth orbiter called QPACE, Josh Colwell, which is a CubeSat particle aggregation and collision experiment. We also have invested in several others. Next slide, please. This is sort of like some tech development money. We're providing money to the Mars Microorbiter, the Hydrogen Albedo Lunar Orbiter, and David, which is from Jeff Landis, an asteroid visitor using ion engines, which also sounds like pretty neat technology. Next slide, please. So let me finish by talking a little bit about planetary defense. Many of you might know, next slide, please, that we've established what we call the Planetary Defense Coordination Office. Next slide, please. This is sort of the organization of the office. What's critical to note is this helps codify how we're going to move in the future in the research areas that we're going to do, which includes, can you go back one? Which includes open competitive programs for observing NEOs, also integrating with other elements of the federal government in responses. If there is an NEO coming in, how do we alert the public? How do we perhaps do civil defense and move people? And so there's quite a bit of federal government organization. Right below me is Lyndon Lee Johnson, and he is now defined as the Planetary Defense Officer. So I wish him luck. Next slide, please. So let me finish, next slide, please, by a couple international activities. So I want to announce that we're working with JAXA in many environments in many different ways. We now have 3 Hayabusa 2 co-investigators, 3 OSIRIS-REx co-investigators from Japan. Also, we've got the Hayabusa 2 participating scientists that we've announced, and we selected 9 investigators. So this has really been a great collaboration with JAXA, and we're working on several others in the future. Next slide, please. And finally, let me mention that we are working towards announcing an opportunity for ExoMars 2016. This is the mission that was just launched for the interdisciplinary scientists and the guest investigator programs. So please be on the lookout for a ROSE's amendment. That will be released. The date will be really short because it has to line up with ESA's requirements. ESA required a mandatory letter of intent on the 29th of February with proposals due on March 30th. And so we're going to try to line up our end of it such that we can then go through an analysis and make selections for investigators for the IDS and the GI program. Next slide, please. Okay, but before we go into questions, I would like to invite Clyde Neal to the podium and Eileen Stansberry. Will you please come up here?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. It is strange to be standing up here on NASA night, that's for sure. But we have an event that we need to mark. And we heard through email and various other venues of communication that Steve Mackwell has had enough of the LPI. So marking that with great rejoicing, no, not with great, Now, Steve is leaving the directorship of the LPI, and this is his last LPSC in charge. So we can't let him leave without marking the occasion. So on behalf of the planetary science community, we got together and we presented this little plaque to commemorate it. It's an Outstanding Service Award presented to Dr. Stephanie Muckwell. What? On the 21st of March 2016 by the planetary science community in recognition of his unwavering support of planetary science as director of the Lunar and Planetary Institute 2002 to 2016. So Steve, would you please come up and try not to drop this?
Okay, couldn't let headquarters and Clive go unchallenged, and since we're close proximity to the Johnson Space Center and space exploration in general is very important, we organized a flown flag from the year that you became the director of LPI and developed a montage with a flag from STS 109.
Why, thank you. I am unaccustomed to being speechless. Yes, you did. I wasn't anticipating this. I thought we were going to questions. I guess this is a way of kind of diverting attention from. I have to say that you know, when I took over the LPI in 2002, it was an interesting experience because I'd been involved with the planetary science community on and off for a few years, but it was a very different experience to be totally embedded in the planetary science community. And one of the greatest experiences that I've had since I've been part of this community is to participate in these meetings, because to me, these meetings are kind of family. You know, this is the only meeting I know where you've got 1,500 to 2,000 people who actually like each other and who know each other. And so I've really enjoyed being part of this community very, very much. And I'm not going far. I'm still staying involved. And I'm looking forward to helping somebody else transition into being the director of the LPI going forward, though it's highly unlikely that their email address won't be Smackwell or something like that. We're hoping for somebody with a name that's a little less, yeah. On that happy note, I think we should take questions for the ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, lady and gentlemen. To my left.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Richest performance.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's start right over here.
Okay, Jim, very nice talk. You showed SLS and Europa on the same line. Can you say something about the future launch capability of the United States?
So indeed, NASA is investing in the Space Launch System, as this is for human exploration. but we began a study several years ago to determine if we could use it for Europa. SLS will have to have a certain cadence for which we might be able to help in that cadence by using an SLS every once in a while. That was the basic concept. And what we found out is that we could get a Europa mission going direct from Earth to Europa in about 2.9 years versus nearly 8-year multiple interior gravity to get it out there. This to me is really blows open the outer solar system and allows us to look at that in a completely different way.
Okay. I can't see very well against these lights, so if you, when you ask your question, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, David Minton from Purdue University. I actually have a very similar question, but I'll ask it in a different way. I was actually part of a study informally through Purdue to look at a Uranus mission, and SLS certainly is a game changer. However, a single launch on SLS costs a not insignificant fraction of planetary science's total budget. So is there a plan or a negotiation with the human spaceflight side in order to allow us to use SLS without blowing the budget for each time we develop a mission?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're also designing the Europa multiple flyby to fly on an ELV, a non-SLS mission. So it's compatible. What has to happen, of course, is we want to be able to see SLS mature. We want to be able to then negotiate a potential additional funding that will be needed, that would be necessary for them to fly an additional one. But the total infrastructure and the ability to keep the personnel active to launch an SLS is believed to be borne completely by human exploration. Much like the shuttle. We leverage and use the shuttle quite a bit with only an incremental cost associated with it. So although those details need to be worked out, that's our plan for negotiating. And shuttle is the model.
Nathan?
The next mission, likely in the Mars program, will be an orbiter, perhaps in 2022. Can you speak to the funding profile of that and what the plans are?
So within the President's budget, we've been given $10 million for further study. So this is a critical year to determine what we're going to do in that next opportunity. Work with MEPAG. There's also been a number of groups that have been looking at this. But indeed, right now we have a full budget for 2020, and that's the one we're really building. And we only have planning funding for the mission after that.
Yes.
Bryony Horgan, Purdue University. I had a quick question for Jonathan about the demographics collection. I know that they're going to be anonymized, but are they going to include data on whether or not the award was selected? Because ideally, what you'd like to know is, relative funding rates between demographic groups.
Well, that's a great question. I noticed that Ellen's here. Ellen, could you come up and answer that question for me, since I'm woefully ill-prepared to discuss the demographics?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I mean, the whole reason we're doing this is to try to understand how many women, how many underrepresented groups are actually proposing. So first of all, I really want to urge everybody in the community to fill out the form. It is voluntary because you can't demand that people fill out demographic information forms. But the National Science Foundation has done this for years, and they get quite a high compliance rate. And therefore, they can analyze things like how many underrepresented groups are applying and are they getting selected or not. So exactly as you say, what's critical is that who's applying, and then what are the funding rates. But the data are stripped away from your proposal as soon as you enter it. And so it's only later. The names are never brought back with the demographic information. My office, the Office of the Chief Scientist, and the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity at NASA will receive basically data that says, here's the different groups, here's all the data for who applied, and was that proposal, no names, was that proposal selected or turned down? So all the other information is stripped away. The reviewers of your proposal will never see that information at all. So thank you for asking.
Thanks,
We're
Ellen.
really excited about this data. It's really important because we're scientists and we really want to know, do we have an issue with implicit bias? Do we have an issue maybe with women not applying in numbers to instrument programs, to teams? So again, it's really critical to get the data, which is why it's critical for everybody to participate. Thanks.
So for those of you who do not know, that's Ellen Stofan, the Chief Scientist of NASA. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks. Janie Radobob, Brigham Young University. I understand that in the last couple of years, the Deep Space Network has failed to collect some data from spacecraft. A few of these pieces of data not recoverable because of the nature of what happens, for example, on Cassini. And so in that sense, in many ways, as customers of the Deep Space Network, our needs are not being met by them. Do you have a sense of how, the depth of this problem, the ways forward to solutions, ways that we can help?
So indeed, the Deep Space Network is absolutely critical for us. And it's being funded by Human Exploration. And it's well known that they received an additional cut this particular fiscal year, and with direction that they're trying to implement. We are looking quite carefully at our projects to determine how that may or may not affect the guarantee that we're getting from DSN of a very high ability to track. And I forgot what the percentage is, 98 point something or other. So you know, they can't do 100%, but they're guaranteeing a pretty high level of tracking. And so the data's not in yet. It's a hot discussion. John Grunsfeld knows about it, Gerst knows about it, you know, and we're going to try to resolve any problems that may be occurring, potentially due to the funding cut, within NASA headquarters.
Yes?
Hello, Bethany Ellman, Caltech. So I'm a fan of Ocean Worlds, but I wanted to get a few more details about the nature of the relationship between the congressional mandate to sort of create a program versus the congressional dollars allotted versus a finite planetary sciences budget. Like, for example, one of the immediate consequences has been the addition of Ocean Worlds to an existing program rather than the creation of a new one. Can you comment on how you see the future of this perhaps new program element panning out through time, and how NASA must respond to the mandate within its budget confines?
So as I mentioned, what we did is, rather than let the budget line called Outer Planets expire with the end of our Cassini mission, that we were calling it Outer Planets and Ocean Worlds. That's just a minor step. What we really need to do is develop an entire program around it. We've started to discuss this at the Outer Planets Assessment Group. We're seeking input from the community. This was unanticipated by the administration when they provided a budget to Congress. So indeed, there's no 5-year rollout of an Ocean Worlds program in the president's budget. You just won't see it. So this is a building year in terms of where we think about how that program will be put together, and we need a lot of community input. So I would encourage you to come and give us your comments through OPEC.
Can I have a quick follow-up in terms of more specifically what are the immediate steps for community engagement that you anticipate undertaking to get the feedback from the community to respond?
Well, we've asked OPEC for a roadmap.
Right.
Okay, and you know, so a roadmap is more of the tactical way that we want to be able to pursue key questions that are in the decadal and how we might be able to do that. Along the way, that means we may uncover critical mission concepts that we would want to do a variety of studies for. I anticipate that much of this will lead up into a big discussion that will happen at the National Academy level in the next decadal, of what are the missions and how will they relate, et cetera. Because right now, our plate's full with the Europa flyby mission between now and when we do the next decadal.
Yep.
Denton Abel, American Museum of Natural History. To follow up on Janie's question about DSN, the LADI mission had a significant component of a test bed for a laser communication system. Can you amplify how that could either not replace, but certainly augment the Deep Space Network and perhaps fit into future Discovery class missions?
Yeah, so the same organization that funds the DSN also funds the optical comm technology activity. So we did indeed work with that part of HEO, it's called SCAN, and put on LADI our first laser comm, optical communication from the moon. It was a small system, but man, was it powerful. Now, you may not know, but LADI has come down. It's over. The system worked fabulous. We even got the European Space Agency to help track it. This has enabled us to then also continue to work with human exploration, but also the Space Technology Mission Directorate, offering the next generation optical communication as a test on our Discovery call. Now, although I didn't point it out, but several of the Discovery missions, 3 of them out of the 5 that we're currently in Phase A, are going to fly, once selected, deep space optical comm well beyond the moon and out into the solar system, and that's indeed what we want. It's really our future. You know, high-speed data, you just can't beat it. We got to have it. So these are the kind of relationships that are incredibly important for us to do, test, implement, and fly them routinely.
At the back.
Yep. John Kristoff, College of William and Mary in Virginia. I might have missed it, but I don't think I heard any specific mention of the asteroid redirect mission, asteroid rendezvous mission, and I know that people are still working on that one at NASA. Has that funding finally kicked the bucket, or is that still circulating somewhere?
Okay, so within NASA headquarters, there are several organizations, and Planetary Science Division has a very small role to play in the asteroid redirect mission, or ARM. And that role is to uncover the targets that they will eventually consider, down select, and go to one. But the actual mission is being developed by human exploration. It's not being developed by planetary science at all.
Hey, Jim, this is Paul Abel over here from NASA Johnson Space Center.
Paul, are you interrupting?
I can add a little bit about that. There will be a community call for a mission investigator team that will come out, and stay tuned for that. That's hopefully later this year. So the idea is there will be a call for investigators. There will also be a call for instruments as well. So stay tuned, hopefully later this summer.
Sounds like a great opportunity, and it's not planetary science funding. I like it.
Eileen Yingst, PSI. With regard to the 27 education proposals that were funded, it was really good to see a lot of states represented. I did notice that it looked a little bit like a map of cellular coverage. Right, there was a lot of dots in the urban centers, many on the West Coast, and a great deal between, in Boswash, but it was a little less distributed throughout the rest of the states. Do you have a sense for why that distribution came out the way it did, and what are your plans to address it?
Thank you for your question. We were quite chagrined when we saw the gap in the middle of the states. But we went back and analyzed who actually proposed, and they did not propose from those states as much either. And so it wasn't that they were not successful in peer review as much as they just didn't propose. Actually, that is not surprising from when we see some other engagement type of activities. What was more surprising was in the Southeast to me. There was very little that came in from the Southeast region.
Like Florida.
Like Florida, right. And so we have our work cut out for us. What I'm currently doing is what I call a reach map. And this will show those actual locations of activities across all our 27. For example, the Science Museum of Minnesota, they have a 10-year legacy with NSF building upon over 300 institutions, science institutions, and museums across the country. So that reach map will show more pins, if you will, in those underserved areas, but we clearly have our work cut out for us.
Just to amplify what Kristen just said, I'm as part of one of those successful proposals, with people with the capabilities are, at least we are reaching out to a lot of the Intermountain states, the Midwest, and some of these areas that are not represented on the map. So I look forward to seeing the map that you provide that'll amplify how that outreach is going to extend.
Learners of all ages in the learning environment. So it's a lofty goal that we're trying to attain.
Horton Newsom, University of New Mexico. And this is also about education. And the issue is access to resources for people like me. I'm on Mars Science Lab. We can't get a bumper sticker out of JPL or a poster or anything to use to distribute out to teachers, things like that. I had a presentation to a bunch of blind students, and fortunately I had borrowed from JPL a wheel and a model. But this kind of material is essential for us to be able, and for me and my graduate students and undergraduate students who do a huge amount of outreach, unfunded except otherwise, but those sorts of resources are really important for us to have access to for public engagement. The Museum of Natural History in New Mexico is a huge education program. We need material, be able to have materials to hand out about our missions, and something more than what I can print out on my laser printer. And so I think that sort of resources are critical for generating the public interest and supporting also the STEM interests that we are addressing when we're actually going out and working with the students.
I appreciate that sentiment greatly, and I shared that sentiment for many years. But what I really encourage all of us to first do when we're going into any learning environment is to ask them first what they need from us. Sometimes a bumper sticker is really not what they're looking for. They really want that personal involvement from someone like yourself, and to tell your stories and to inspire those kids or whoever the learners are. And so one of the things that we found going through this process was there was a lot of, what we kind of call chum, left behind and wasn't used as effectively as it could be. And so what we're really trying to do is to have a strategic impact. And the first step of that is to ask first, what is the need? What truly is the need before we go into those learning environments wherever they are?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Let me say something, and I'll probably be chastised for this. But I think that's unconscionable. I don't like that one damn bit. And if you need something and you're not getting it, I want an email from you. Okay, but you have to do this first. And that was
well, thank you.
That is ask what they need,
sure.
and then if you can't get it, you let me know personally, and I'll take care of it.
Well, thank you. It was a little facetious to talk about bumper stickers, but 3D models for blind students.
We have blind material. We have
it. Sort of thing that
absolutely
we need to have available. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Do that.
My pleasure.
Brittany.
Hi there, Brittany Schmidt, Georgia Tech. Just really quickly, a comment. Thank you for breaking out the keyword research, because I know it's been asked for multiple times. I know it takes a while to change things and figure out how to do that research. That's gonna be really helpful. So thanks very much for having that. And then a very easy question, is there a planned next NAI node? Because I'd kind of expected it this year-ish. Is there any news on that front?
So you're asking when the next competition for NAI nodes? I have to.
Or if there's
NASA Astrobiology.
Yes, the NASA Astrobiology Institute.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's on a regular basis. I mean, I think it's 5 years, so it just hasn't come up yet.
I can't answer that
I don't
question.
think, it's not going to be this year, and I don't think it's next, but I think it's the year after that.
We just had Can 7 last year.
Yeah, we just had Can 7. You missed it?
No, I apply every time.
Okay. Well, thank you for
and
that.
I thought we would actually have
a
NASA night without Mark.
Is it my arch
Mark
nemesis?
Sykes, PSI, softball for Jonathan.
Oh, my arch nemesis. I'm so glad to see him on.
Yeah, where's your cape? Could we get a breakdown of the budgets for the program elements in RA over the past few years to match up with the same kind of information you give out at this meeting?
Sure, absolutely. I'm surprised it's not
Yeah,
readily
so
available.
Max has published those, because I presented them year after year after year.
No, not the date breakdown of the program element budgets. That hasn't been distributed for the past few years.
Okay.
Oh, past couple of years. Okay, fair enough.
Duly noted.
Okay. It looks like we're done with question time. I would invite everybody to get together downstairs for the student scientist reception. And if we could thank the folks from NASA for very kindly coming forward tonight.